This presentation is on the respiratory system. Respiratory system begins, quite obviously for most of us, right up here, nose, mouth. Should primarily be breathing through the nose. Within the sinus cavities, around the nose, either side, slightly above, behind the eyes, this area has a mucus lining that keeps that area damp and it keeps it warm, so that the air that enters the body is moisturized and warmed. I'm sure some of you have been in the colder climates and you're out there breathing on that cold wintry day and you get this burning sensation up here and it can ultimately hurt your lungs. You'll get a burning all the way down. The air that we take through this system should be warm and moist. On down the throat, through the trachea, down into the lungs, this area should be kept warm and moist. A lot of people, when they get what they feel to be an infective situation, they start to get some drainage or they get some irritation in this area, they'll run out and they'll buy an antihistamine of some kind, something that will dry up this area. This is part of your immune system, actually. Anything that has been brought in here as an invader, any bacteria, dust particles, so forth, there are little fingers that line this mucous membrane area. And they move the debris back up the trachea so then it will flip over and go down in the esophagus and be dealt with in the digestive tract. To dry this area up can make the symptoms worse, and at the minimum it would do would be to push the symptoms down into the body, deeper into tissue. Now, many of us have heard of a thing called a recycling and a healing crisis related to that. A retracing would be a better word. Anything that we suppress with drugs or aspirins or antihistamines, sometime later in your life, and it might be months, might be years, especially if you start to do some cleaning up, you can go back through that illness. It has to come out of the body somehow. So I suggest you don't suppress these symptoms. We'll talk about some herbals and some supplements that will enhance the body and allow it to do its job here and ease your discomfort at the same time. Come on down into the branch, into the lungs. Lungs are here, either side of the chest. There's actually several lobes to these lungs. And within this structure, kind of picture it as branching and branching again, and each one of these branches looks like it's got a little cluster of grapes. And each one of these little clusters is little tiny balls. These are called alveoles. And this is where the oxygen and the carbon dioxide are exchanged from the air, from our bloodstream. That's what the breathing procedure does here in the lungs. Function of the respiratory system is to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of the bloodstream and maintain our ability to function. Oxygen in the bloodstream is critical to keeping this entire organism operating. So this area here, these alveoles, are what become damaged, for example, in something like emphysema. They actually become deteriorated, scarred, and they do not exchange the carbon dioxide, oxygen back and forth readily. There's a lot of illnesses that can happen in this area. Bronchitis, an infection, pneumonia, an infection. The emphysema is not necessarily an infection, but it can come about after due to damaging of the lungs. Smoking is the most common cause of damage to the lungs in this country. Unfortunately, up until very, very recently, smoking was on the downturn with the exception of teenage smoking, which is going up. But now with all the Hollywood focus on cigars, smoking has become fashionable again, and there's an awful lot of information that indicates cigars are no safer than cigarettes. Secondhand smoke is just as deadly, and actually sometimes cigars have even more of the basic toxins going into your lungs. So far they're not putting all the additives and chemicals that used to be in cigarettes. But just because you see your favorite movie star smoking a cigar, don't think that it's safe. That's just somebody's marketing plan. Underneath the lungs is the diaphragm. The diaphragm separates this thoracic cavity from the visceral cavity, and it also, the diaphragm helps move the lungs a bit. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. This is a large, broad muscle, kind of follows your bottom edge of your rib cage under the lungs. We'll come back up here. Sinus infections. Fairly common. Sometimes transfers into an ear tube infection because they're right here in this area. Most common reason for a sinus infection, especially something that is long-term. Now, you might get an occasional thing now and then, but long-term sinus infection would be a systemic yeast condition. And the same thing would go with these ear infections. If the colon is out of balance, if you've had your immune system compromised, perhaps with a long string of antibiotics or something of that nature, and there's a lot of other reasons for a yeast condition, and we're not going to go into all that right now, but you can get a systemic infection up here in the sinuses, and to treat it with antibiotics may seem to relieve the symptoms slightly, and then it keeps coming back. So more antibiotics. But what the antibiotics are doing are maintaining the imbalance in the colon, the weak immune system, and allowing the fungal situation to exist up here. So we'll talk about some things a little bit that will help clear that up. In the glandular system, we talked about the pituitary gland, which is back in here. If it is weak, it can cause drainage in this area here also. So there's a couple of strong possibilities for these sinuses to have some problems. In this area, the esophagus is usually very little that happens here of great harm. Sometimes we get sore throats, and sometimes it irritates the bronchial tube. The main thing we can do here is keep it moist. Keep it warm and moist, and not fungal warm and moist, but warm and moist as in with proper mucus coating. Don't do things that dry out that system. The lungs, irritants come down into the lungs. We might have cigarette irritant. We might have, used to be quite prevalent, coal miners had problems with their lungs. People who deal with asbestos, which is pretty much out of our environment. There's a lot of things that can irritate the lungs. Just stepping outside after you've seen this system presentation and you go out and you get in your car, you're going to take in some irritants. And they're supposed to get trapped in this mucus and out of the lungs, and they're supposed to get pumped back in and out as we breathe. But every once in a while, some of these things get into our system through our lungs. We'll come down here to the diaphragm. The diaphragm, as I said, separates these two areas of the body, rather large cavities, but the diaphragm is actually critical to breathing. Most of us have gone through life, and we're kind of in a society that teaches us this, that the way we're supposed to breathe is either very, very shallow, like, and that's the way most people breathe, or if we're taking a deep breath, we take our rib cage up here and we expand it. You know, and if I were to say to the group there, to say, okay, let's all take a deep breath, we would probably see most everybody in the group go with the rib cage. And what happens at that point is when you expand this rib cage, and I'm going to give you a little diagram here. Let's go with this. Let's say this is your spine, and that's your chest, and there's your diaphragm, and these are your lungs. If you expand, if you expand your rib cage here, you pull these ribs right at the side in, and you expand the rib cage, and the diaphragm is pulled up, just the way this drawing is right here. Diaphragm's pulled up. It actually squeezes off effectively almost a third of the bottom of your lung capacity. So in actuality, this is a shallow breath. It takes a lot of effort, but it's a shallow breath. People who study opera, study yoga, those people are very aware of diaphragm breathing, what I call the belly breath. Take the tummy and extend it out. The diaphragm, this large muscle here, is forced to drop. The lungs are forced to fill that entire cavity. When the diaphragm drops, the lungs are forced to fill. You create effectively 1/3 more breathing. Now, I know most of us are walking around looking very prim and proper, and I had some military training and all that good stuff. The way we should be breathing is out with the belly. Just force your belly out when you're sucking air in through your nose. And then when you exhale, if you're going to do it kind of therapeutically, you want to open your mouth and pull your tummy way back against your spine. So we get a thing I call a ha breath, and it's I know that's not the most attractive thing you've seen in your life, and if I was to walk around going you'd think I was a really strange person. But that's the proper way to be breathing. There's a couple of things that happen here. Through the diaphragm here, there's an aorta that is carrying carbon dioxide and a loaded blood with debris, carbon dioxide, pyruvic acids, and so forth. And it's supposed to go to the lungs, where we convert that to carbon dioxide and breathe it off. So we pinch that aorta by leaving the diaphragm squeezed up and sitting all hunched over. We tend to breathe very shallow, and we tend to be very acidic. It is this blood getting to the lungs that helps make us alkaline. That's one of the big factors. And we talk about a lot that this whole organism should be an alkaline organism. There's a couple that we're familiar with. They're in their 60s or 70s, and they could not get alkaline until they learned this belly breathing technique. All the nutrition didn't quite make it, but when they learned how to do the they became alkaline. Now there they are, they're walking around their condominium development, and their neighbors are looking at them, and they think, you know, they're getting a little old and senile because there they are walking around going but they're a lot healthier than their neighbors. This is so critical and so important to many people except our civilization. Now, we've done a lot of work with the Hawaiian healing techniques, and I mentioned earlier that this is what I would make that noise when I breathe in and out. Let me get my eraser here. And there's a term that the Hawaiians use for breathing properly, called ha, called the ha breath. And that's the rapid in, pushing the tummy out, and then a deep breath out, making the noise, pulling the diaphragm back in, the stomach back in. The out breath should be at least twice as long as the in. And you make the noise to help remind you how deep you're supposed to do that. So that's called a ha breath. There is also a term that the Hawaiians use called ha'ali. Some of you may have heard that, maybe in an old surfer movie from the Mickey Mouse type days. Generally interpreted as being a foreigner, someone not from the islands. What happened is when the white man went to the Hawaiian environment, breathing was so important to the Hawaiians that any time they would perform some important function, like blessing a meal or praying or doing some healing work, they would breathe first. And let's say I was going to get up and give this talk for somebody. I would stand here and I would go, ha, by the way, also means 4. So it's very important that you do 4 of those breaths to get the system working properly. Well, when the white man came to the islands, what they saw, and these were supposed to be very powerful people and great healers and everything else, and they would come in, and if it was time to eat and they were going to give a blessing, they would just go, walk up there and give their little blessing, and they'd eat. Or if they were going to do some healing, they'd walk up and they'd go, and they'd do their healing. What this means is breathe, breath, ali or auli, does not. That became the name of a foreigner, someone who doesn't breathe. It was that obvious to them. The Hawaiians even at one time had a kiss that was an exchange of breath. There's a tradition where the patriarch of the family, if he's about to die, and it's in rather normal circumstances, so he's just laid down tired and ready to go, they call in the next in line son, and they exchange a breath. The patriarch gives a breath to the next in line. There's a significance to the energies and the history and so forth that they do that with. There's a lot happens during this deep breathing. Mechanically, when you do the deep breathing, you actually burn calories. It steps up your insulin ATP cycle. You can burn up tremendous calories doing deep breathing, especially the diaphragm deep breathing. The other thing that happens for a lot of us is this muscle right here, the belly muscles that are in this area, become very weak from sitting down all the time. We sit at computers, we sit in cars, I sit at a desk, and maybe I don't get enough exercise. Well, all of a sudden I've got this stiff neck. If you can do a little demonstration, by tightening these muscles, you'll relax the neck muscles. It's really phenomenal what happens. So the deep breathing, by forcing the belly in and out, will exercise that muscle probably a lot more than most of us get, and then you'll be less susceptible to this tension in the neck that your chiropractor might be working on your neck. He's actually working on the wrong end of your body. He needs to be down in this area, or you need to be doing some exercises. This deep breathing, this ha breath, is absolutely critical. I'll be driving down the highway, and let's say I'm getting a little sleepy. I don't pull over and get a cup of coffee anymore. I know that's not good for my health. Maybe I'm hydrated, and I know that should keep me awake, but I'm still getting a little sleepy. What I will do is remind myself to breathe. I'll put my finger on my nose so that that's in, and I'll put my hand down on my tummy so that that's being pushed out. Now, I don't do two hands at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to go in, okay, and out. And I go, and a couple of breaths, I'm wide awake. You go like, wow, where did that come from? Oxygenation of your tissue, oxygenation of your brain, step up of the insulin ATP cycle. Keeping this system working, keep it clean, keep it healthy, do the deep breathing. We're a whole civilization that thinks it's unimportant. I was reading some literature on a fellow that was studying some Buddhist psychology and a few things, and he relates a story. One of the students went to the master and said, well, you know, we've been doing an awful lot of talk about breathing. This is really boring stuff here. Can't we get on to something else? So the master said, yes, Cricket, come sit by the pond with me. So they go and they sit down by the pond. And he says, now, tell me. And he says, oh, I'm really tired of all this breathing stuff. It's a waste of time. Ah, yes, Cricket. He grabs him by the back of the neck and he stuffs his head underwater. And the guy's flopping around like, oh my gosh, and he pulls him up after about a minute and a half and he says, how'd that feel? And he said, it was horrible. It was I was frightened. I was scared. Oh my gosh, you know, I thought this and that. And he said, well, what do you think about breathing now? Whole different perspective on breathing when we start to lose it. You can do without food, and you can do without water, and there's some literature that people have done that for 40 days. Okay? Try 40 days without air. Try 40 minutes with that. Try 40 seconds for most people. The best might be Houdini, and I think he was like 3 minutes, maybe 7 maxes, but he learned to control. We need to keep this system working. We need to fill it. If you do this little thing, you're leaving carbon dioxide in the bottom of this system. You're leaving it polluted. If anything has gotten in there, if you've gone out in the parking lot and taken a lung full of toxins, and you do your shallow breath, what are you going to do? You're going to open the door, get in the car, and sit down. You're not going to deep breathe. Most people don't. We never think about that. Little caution here. You go out, you get in the car in the summertime. Now, it may not be as warm where you are as where we are, but when that sun is baking your car and you open that door, the car is full of plastic. Now, I don't just mean the dashboard. I mean the air in that car is full of plastic. I would recommend that as soon as possible, you open the windows. Let that air exchange before you start putting on your air conditioner, if at all possible, because if you just jump in there, close the door, sit down, you're going to shallow breathe all that plastic into your system. You turn on your heater or air conditioner, and you pump that plastic right through the system, and it's in there. Then you just keep recycling it and breathing it. Good way to get rid of some pollutants. Open the windows. What I try to do, out in traffic, sometimes in a parking lot, I'll leave the door open. Hopefully that I've checked to make sure no one's about to whip into that parking spot. But you leave the door open. I mean, that's a tremendous ventilation system. Turn the key, put the windows down. If you can't do that, shut the door, put the windows down. Drive a little bit. Get that stuff out of there. Keep this thing clean. Don't do the cigars. Ventilate your car. There's a lot of things we can do. Exposure to chemicals in our environment can damage the lungs. The EPA has allowed bug spray people, pesticides, to mask and descent bug spray. And this is how bug spray, some absorption, but through your lungs, gets into your system, causes nerve damage. You could be in a hotel room and not know that they just sprayed, because it's now legal to unscent. So be real cautious about that sort of thing, but keep these things strong, and we'll talk about some things. But the deepest breathing you can do exchanges air the quickest. Breathe through your nose on the in, out with your mouth open so you can really force air out. Don't dry this system up. There's some great herbs we can use to keep the mucus under control, keep things moving, keep it moist. That will keep this system healthy. Okay, we're going to go to some of the herbals. Fenugreek and thyme. Actually, fenugreek, and I'm going to write thyme underneath it. One of my real favorites. Fenugreek is primarily responsible for mucus. MUCUS, I believe. Keeps the tissue in your sinuses and in your lungs, through the body mucous membranes, keeps them moist, keeps them operating, controls an excess of mucus, but keeps the tissue soft and pliable and keeps it healthy. What happens when we add thyme to it, it becomes real specific to this area, to the sinus area. Fenugreek in general will do the entire respiratory system. But this is my favorite combination for like an antihistamine or the beginning of a cold pill. If you've got a lot of congestion going on, you need to get your head clear, fenugreek and thyme. Some associates have told me some very interesting stories. Had two people I can recall that had long-term sinus problems. Been checked out for the infections, been checked out for all that kind of stuff. Couldn't find any reason for this. One of the people even had an odor in their nose, a lot. So they said, gosh, I don't know what to do. He said, well, let's do the fenugreek and thyme. Let's get you opened up a little bit and get this thing healing. They did fenugreek and thyme from up to about 4 to 6 months. At about that time, one person sneezed out a button. The other person sneezed out a little bitty shoelace. Now you go, oh, wow, that's gross. No, it's not gross. Little babies do that. They find something really neat, and if they can't eat it, they'll put it in their nose, and it disappears. The person with the shoelace had had an X-ray, didn't show. The person with the button never had an X-ray. I'm not recommending X-rays. I'm recommending fenugreek and thyme. By relaxing all this tissue and allowing it to heal, it released that trapped material. They got rid of their chronic sinus problems. They got rid of the odor. They got rid of everything. It was fantastic. Fenugreek, thyme, wonderful for this area of the body. Marshmallow, again, mucus. There's got to, yeah, we're going to do that. MUCOUS. I did it right the first time, didn't I? Okay. Marshmallow. Mucus anywhere in the body, especially in the lungs. Now, marshmallow, and I don't mean the candy, it's marshmallow root. There's a law of similars within herbals, and marshmallow grows in very damp, moist, almost swampy areas. So anything that has to do with moisture, marshmallow would be appropriate. That's where we do this law of similars. And I believe that's how a lot of herbals were developed, intuitively. People applied the law of similars. That's an ancient Greek and older society idea. Okay, marshmallow root will move mucus anywhere in the body. You can use it for the whole system, but it should definitely be in a respiratory formula. It's fantastic stuff. By the way, it will also help dissolve stones in the kidney. Kidney, water, okay? The law of similars applies. Marshmallow's fantastic at kidney stones. Great stuff. Okay, next we're going to go to lobelia. Now, lobelia is a stimulant, mover. I seem to be drying out here. Must be too much marshmallow. I'm getting a little dry. Okay, stimulant and a mover. Lobelia. Been around for a long time. Went out of favor for a number of years because there were some seemingly adverse effects from it, and the FDA said, oh, no, you can't have lobelia in any of your stuff because it's dangerous. What had happened is that some users of lobelia would take it and extract it, cut it down to its basic ingredient, its most active ingredient called lobeline. Now, lobeline is a mirror image molecule of nicotine, and nicotine is a poison. What happens is you can get a reaction to lobelia that might seem poisonous if you extract it. If you leave lobelia in its natural state, in the whole herb, there's never a problem with it. It's self-regulating. So what we do is we keep it in the natural herb state. Okay? I'm going to get another pen here. Hold on. There we go. Lobelia kept in the whole herb state is very safe. It has a self-regulating feature to it. Let's say you've got a lot of congestion in your lung area, and you've been putting up with a lot of mucus, and you know that it's building up in here, and you know you need to get it out so you don't end up with pneumonia or something. If you'll put lobelia either into a formula or just take it straight as an herb. Now, you can do it as a liquid herb or you can do it as a powdered herb. But what happens, there's a certain point, like let's say you're taking 6, 8, 10 capsules of lobelia. You'll take it and you'll feel fine, and it's a little stimulant, and it's a little moving things around, and all of a sudden you'll purge. It's not even nauseating. It's just all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, I feel strange, and you go, pah, and there's all the mucus. That's the way lobelia works. A child could probably pick up a bottle of lobelia, take the whole thing, and they'd go, poop, and it'd be done with it. There's a point where you cannot over-ingest lobelia. It's self-purging. So fortunately, after some legal battles, lobelia is back out on the market and being able to take internal, and it's now available in some excellent formulas, and it's usually in that area. A wonderful herb. It can be added to any formula as a mover. Much like cayenne is a stimulant and a mover, and that's our next one, lobelia can do the same thing for you. It enhances the movement of herbs through the body. But we're going to keep it in here in this lung formula because it's great to break loose that mucus and get it out. Okay, we're down cayenne. Cayenne is also a mover, a stimulant, very, very high in vitamin C. Fantastic. Could be a great vitamin C supplement. Mover and a stimulant. I remember a client came to an associate, had some kind of bronchial problem and had some kind of infection, and they'd been this way for, gosh, a month, easily. Been to several practitioners. And they'd all tried the golden seal, and they tried this, and they tried that, and they couldn't make any progress with this person. So they had come to our office, and we're sitting there looking at them, and it's like, what I see is this person's in slow motion. Did the blood pressure check, did a temperature check. Blood pressure was down about 90/60. Temperature was 94. And they're all bundled up in a coat. And I said, I think what we have here is you're in slow motion. So we stayed with the herbal program that they were on. There was plenty of the antibiotics, the immune builders, and all that other stuff. I said, I would like you to take 4 capsules of cayenne, and you might also see that as capsicum. Take 4 capsules of cayenne and go outside for a minute and walk around in the sun. Give me about 15 minutes. And they did that. Came back in, blood pressure was up to 120 over 75. Temperature was up to 98.6. And they said, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this good in a long time. I said, wonderful. Stay with the cayenne. If you can take 4, and that's just what I did at the time, nothing specific here, but you know, take cayenne, breakfast, lunch, and supper. Keep your blood pressure up. Keep your circulation up. Keep your body temperature up. Then all the rest of this stuff can work. Because it really wasn't getting through the system properly, and it wasn't being metabolized properly. This is a fantastic herb. By the way, a little aside here, this is also a wonderful herb to use for ulcers. It's a great, with its vitamin C, with its circulatory, with its stimulation of mucus. Now, we've got mucus up here as being a bad thing. I don't mean mucus is bad. I mean excess mucus is bad. All of this area should be coated with a thin coating of mucus. The stomach should have a mucus lining to it. When it gets thin, you get ulcers. Cayenne or capsicum, as you take it, will begin to cause the stomach to produce more mucus. Some people take 1 capsule and they go, boy, that's hot. Okay, take 1 for a couple of days. Then take a couple more, and take a couple more, and build yourself up. Wonderful herbal to be used for the circulatory system and keeping things moving through the body. Sage. Sage is, in this system, used as an antiseptic. It helps keep the lungs clean. I would put sage in a formula with marshmallow fenugreek and use it as an antiseptic. It's excellent in something like bronchitis or pneumonia to have sage in your formula. Very high trace minerals. One of the best things that's in there for this system is silica. Not silicon, silica. Silicon doesn't exist in nature all by itself. This is combined with a little oxygen molecule, and it's not sand, but it's really finely trace mineral silica, and it is excellent for the structure of the lungs. It makes those little alveoles that we talked about stronger. Makes that tissue stronger in there. Wonderful for the lungs. Okay, next is slippery elm. Like its name says, it's a bit of a lubricant. Anything where you've got a dry, raspy situation in the lungs, slippery elm would be real appropriate for that. It's nutritive, so if someone's kind of off their feed from feeling sick, if they take slippery elm, they're going to get a little food. Slippery elm also gets things able to move when we're moving this large amounts of mucus and so forth. Slippery elm would be excellent for that. Very soothing. Slippery elm helps heal tissue. We even put it in some broken bone formulas. Mullein. Mullei's a fantastic herb here. It is an expectorant and a healer. I think lobelia should have the word expectorant up here, if used properly. Mullein, also known as rabbit tobacco. Old-time farmers, before they had combines that were air-conditioned and all closed in, they'd be out there in the field all day, bringing in the wheat and everything, and all that dust and dirt, and of course they'd get a bunch of it in their lungs. On the way home, this stuff grows on the side of the road, and you've probably seen it. It's got nice broad leaves, a little fuzzy. Gets a stalk, and the stalk looks like a little, kind of like a wheat kernel on the top of it. They take the leaves, roll them up, and smoke them. Now, I'm not encouraging smoking, because that would also bring in some carbon monoxide and a few other things. but there was enough of the active ingredients in the smoke from mullein that it would soothe their irritated lungs from all that dust and debris from the daytime. The best way to do it, the ideal way, would be to take the stuff home, dry it, and ingest it as an herb. They could have taken it home, dried it, and made a tea. That would have been helpful too, but they wanted instant relief, and it works. Mullein is fantastic at soothing the bronchial tissue and helping get the mucus and so the debris moved out of it. Horseradish. This is another expectorant. Has some excellent minerals in it that help heal the lungs. I've got a little interesting formula that a friend of mine told me for a bronchial problem. A lot of congestion. This person told me that they were going to a concert in a major city, and they had been kind of a roadie as they were growing up, and they knew Petula Clark real well. So they went to this concert, and Petula did a great job all day Saturday, and at the end of the day, she said, "Oh, I'm getting so congested, I don't know if I can go on tomorrow." So they called the practitioner, and the practitioner said, "Well, here's a quick, home remedy for you. You take horseradish, about a tablespoon in a glass of warm water, about a half a glass. A couple of tablespoons of fresh ground horseradish. Squeeze the juice of a half a lemon in it. Drink it." Now, you don't get what some people would call discomfort from horseradish. I mean, I really like horseradish. You don't get the runny nose in the eyes and so forth by doing it that way. But it released all the congestion, relaxed the lungs, and cleared them. Was able to perform the next day without any problems. A lot of vitamin C in horseradish. So vitamin C is going to be critical to this lung situation. But horseradish should be in a lung formula. It's fantastic at clearing out the lungs. Okay, here we have a group of oils: rosemary, clove, tea tree, geranium, eucalyptus. Clove is a little antiseptic. Rosemary is very relaxing, a little antiseptic. Tea tree, antifungal, also a little relaxing. Geranium helps repair the tissue. Eucalyptus is another expectorant. Going to go back to tea tree. It is quite common to get a fungal infection into the lungs, sometimes by breathing, sometimes by systemic candida. So you don't inhale these things. Tea tree you can take in small amounts internally, but they can all be used externally. Only caution, rosemary raises blood pressure, shouldn't be used with pregnant mothers. Clove, long-term use of clove in large amounts is very stressful on the liver. Other than that, not a problem with any of these. Learn more about oils. They're very, very powerful to be combined with these things. They can be used externally on the chest, around the throat, as an aromatherapy situation. We like to take some of this formula here and add some of that as an adjunct, an additional thing to do to the system. Down here at the bottom again, which probably should be at the top, is water. It is our cheapest medicine. Tremendous amount of work been done with water reference to the lungs. Now, most people say, "Oh, geez, I feel like I'm full of water in my lungs and I need to get it out." And you say, well, that's really not what you want to do. You don't want to do the antihistamine thing. Something like asthma, for example. If you know someone that is asthmatic, one thing that has worked for us in the past and other people, an increase in water. Ask them how much water they're drinking. If your asthmatic is drinking maybe 1 to 2 glasses of water a day, ask them to work their way up to the appropriate amount. And the appropriate amount might be, let me get this little arrow out of the way here. Let's say if you weigh 160 pounds, you convert that directly to ounces. You don't do any serious math. 160 pounds, 160 ounces. Okay? Then you cut that in half and make it 80 ounces. That's your water requirement. So whatever you weigh, turn it into ounces directly, cut it in half, that's what you should be drinking every single day, fresh, clean water. Hydrate the body, hydrate the tissues of the lungs. All of that helps keep the adrenal and the histamine system in balance. If the body is dehydrated, it throws an imbalance into the histamine system, and it will try to fill the lungs with water in an allergic response. It is out of balance. If the person will hydrate, it won't do that. This is the cheapest stuff we got for clearing up these lungs. Go back up, the oils, essential oils. Make sure you're getting true essential oils. Don't just use aromatherapy oils. Many times they are made with synthetic carriers. I highly recommend you stay with the real essential oils. Consider using some of these along with other protocols. Horseradish, great for clearing the lungs out. Slippery elm is very soothing. Mullein is soothing and clearing. Sage is an antiseptic. It's also a slight antispasmodic for the lungs. Cayenne is a circulatory, a mover. It makes things happen faster. Lobelia, also a mover and a stimulant, but it is a great expectorant. You can use it to get stuff out of the lungs. Marshmallow moves mucus through the body, keeps the mucous membrane healthy, but gets excess mucus out. Anything to do with water in the body, remember marshmallow. Fenugreek, excellent at keeping the mucous membrane in tone and healthy. Add some thyme to it, and you've got the best way to clear your sinuses I have ever seen. It does a fantastic job. There's a lot more things we could use here. These are some really good sound basics. Start to work with these, learn about your oils. I can't stress water enough. Absolutely critical that you and your people and everybody you talk to learn about the proper usage of water and the correct amount that you need. We can't stress enough that this is wonderful, wonderful educational information for your people. Give someone the gift of health. Give them the understanding of how the system works, whatever system you're working on. Let them take responsibility, and you can only take good responsibility when you have knowledge. Share this knowledge with people. It'll be the best gift you can give them. I'd like to remind you that at the beginning of this presentation you saw a disclaimer. And we appreciate it if you would understand that this information is just for educational purposes only. It is never meant to take the place of medical treatment or diagnosis. Please keep that in mind as you share it with people. And we do appreciate your sharing this information with people, because the greatest gift you can give to someone is their health and their well-being and understanding of themselves.